You graduated a couple of years ago in your blog post titled 2020 New Decade, New Challenges. A summary of what you wrote states COVID-19 inevitably shaped even the way we take our next step. How has
Yeah.
COVID-19 shaped your next steps?
So I recently left a job in February. I was working in the field of intellectual property, which is, to do with trademarks, patents, and designs. And I was actually gaining some really good experience. When I left in February, I was, of course, actively searching for work. And then March came around, which is when the World Health Organization declared the virus as a pandemic. And so this had put a stop to pretty much everything, and that included the job market. So it's shaped the way that I take my next steps. What's my next step when applying for jobs? What's the next step when it comes to reinventing myself as a professional? What's the next step when it comes to skills that I need to focus on? It's always good to ask those questions about what your next step is going to be and how you plan to execute it.
And do you think this current situation will lead to young professionals in the field to specialize in a particular set of skills?
Young professionals in any field, whether it's intellectual property or business or even in the creative industry, I mean, they will need to hone in and develop skills. Those who perhaps are not used to working from home will need to adapt to their home environment, and they will need to adopt the skills of organization, time management, ensure that they know the ins and outs of their technological systems. So this can be anything from keeping up with emails, Zoom calls, and attending Zoom meetings. And I think that's a really important skill to kind of develop during this time. In addition, I think it's also important to develop the skill of commercial awareness. So in my blog, I talk about how the virus has affected every single industry, which means that surely it's affected yours. So it's good to ask questions about how your company is coping with COVID-19, what your company plans to do for their employees. And it can be anything from just speaking to your manager or a colleague if you have any questions that you're unsure about. If you can maintain that skill of organization, time management, productivity, commercial awareness, it puts you in a better position as a professional.
In your blog post, you also mentioned the occurrence of the virus has ultimately led all industries, like you had mentioned, to undergo a drastic change. The legal sphere is definitely no exception. Considering your experience as a paralegal in the intellectual property industry, would you say such a drastic change, is it going to work in your favor or against young professionals starting in the field?
It is a bit of both. The intellectual property industry, as you know, it's quite technical, and this means that there is a lot of information to absorb. And sometimes as humans, when you're thrown a lot of information, it can be quite daunting, and it does feel like those changes are working against you. But like I said before, I mean, no matter what the change is, it's good to speak to someone who perhaps is going through the same thing in your line of work. Engage with your superior and try to figure out which step would be best to take. But in contrast, as a young professional, it can also work in your favor. When you're put in a situation that you have no control over, it teaches you what you're capable of, and there's always a lesson to be learned from it. So it can show you how you thrive, what you're good at, what you're not so good at. and you can use this time to reflect. In that respect, a drastic change works against you, but also for you.
Wow, that is very, it seems like you're well beyond your years in wisdom, giving advice to the younger people. And considering the impact the current situation is having in the intellectual property industry all around the globe,
Yes.
would you say the experience you're gaining at the moment in the UK is an asset to your future career, or do you see it otherwise?
At the moment, I'm actually gaining remote experience in a firm in London, and I firmly believe that the experience is an asset to my future career because it does delve into areas of law that I find really interesting and really intriguing. So this is everything from media law, intellectual property, reputation management, sports law, online content. These are all areas I want to learn more about because as technology and creativity are becoming more prevalent, it's good to see the relationship between the two and how they go hand in hand.
Anything else you would like to add from a young professional perspective to other young professionals regarding the current situation that we're living and experiencing?
Nobody saw COVID-19 coming, and for a lot of people, they were hoping that 2020 was going to be their year, new decade, new them. And perhaps people have sadly lost jobs, or they're in furlough, or they're just struggling to make ends meet. So what I would like to remind everyone is that we're all in the same boat, and we can actually take this time to focus on what's more important to us. Things like our family, our health, our overall self-care. Yeah, I think if young professionals, not only young professionals, but anybody who's listening in, I think if they can take that away, I think we're all going to be okay.